In this module, we'll turn our attention to the last two arguments that Russell gives us and criticizes that purport to establish the existence of a worshipful monotheistic deity. The first argument is the argument from morals. The second argument is the argument from remedying injustice. So we'll look at the argument from morals first, look at Russell's criticisms, then we'll turn our attention to the argument from remedying injustice and Russell's thoughts about that argument. So as Russell notes, in that book that Immanuel Kant wrote, The Critique of Pure Reason, he criticizes and rejects the teleological argument, the cosmological argument, and the ontological argument. And in fact, he asserts that the teleological argument isn't effective unless the cosmological argument works, and the cosmological argument isn't effective unless the ontological argument works, and the ontological argument doesn't work. In another book that he wrote, The Critique of Practical Reason, Kant introduces this argument from morals and embraces it as an argument to establish the existence of a worshipful monotheistic deity. So how does this argument go? Well, that first premise is an observation, an a posteriori statement about human behavior, not human behavior within the context of some particular society or within some particular code of conduct or so on, but just about human behavior. And it says, there exist universal and universally recognized moral commands which have authority over all people, like murder is immoral. So the idea here isn't that you find that this is legislated in the United States and in Russia and in Australia. The idea is when you look at human action, everybody sees clearly and manifestly that murdering other human beings is immoral. It's a bad thing. Not because it's illegal, not because you're in this country or that country. It's just recognized as bad. Torturing people, maybe another example is torturing people, causing them pain for no purpose. All of these things seem to be just bad. Not bad because of this set of laws or this constitution, but just bad. So it's an observation about the nature of human actions. And it says there seem to be laws, recognizable, manifest, clear-cut laws about what is acceptable, what is unacceptable, what is moral, what is immoral in the way humans treat each other, independent of the societies that they live in, and so on. The second premise says, if that's true, if there are these kind of moral laws, these universal human rights, these universal human responsibilities, then there must be a commander, a lawgiver, something that gives authority to these concepts, these commands. Just like within a society, there are legislators, there are bodies that create laws and imbue them with the authority of that country. So again, it's an analogy between human action, just its very nature, and human action when regulated within society. Conclusion then is, because we see that there are these rules, these precepts about how human beings should treat each other, that are just true about human beings and their actions, and that requires an explanation. The logical explanation is just as within society there are lawgivers, within the natural world there are lawgivers. Now, Russell's criticism of this argument is to invoke the Euthyphro dilemma, to argue that trying to imbue the authority of things like it's wrong to kill people by appealing to the choices or dictates of a deity doesn't actually accomplish that goal. It creates this dilemma that Plato discovered with regard to piety. And so he tells us on page 58-59, we read this passage before, is that difference due to God's fiat or not? If it's due to God's fiat, then for God himself there is no difference between right and wrong, and it is no longer a significant statement to say God is good. If you're going to say, as theologians do, that God is good, then you must say that right and wrong have some meaning which is independent of God's fiat. Because God's fiats are good and not bad independently of the mere fact that he made them, right, then their authority is based on these objective facts, not flowing from God's will. So again, this idea here is that by appealing to the choice of an intelligent agent, right, you invoke that principle of sufficient reason. You say there has to be some reason why. If there's no reason why, invoking that intelligent agent doesn't explain anything. So why is it wrong to kill people? God wills it. Why does God will it? No reason. That doesn't really seem to tell you why that's an authoritative moral precept. If on the other hand you say, well, there are reasons why God willed it, then those reasons hold independent of God's will. They're the things that shaped God's will, and hence it's not God's will that's the source of the normativity, it's those objective reasons. So once again, it looks like this appeal to an intelligent agent in order to explain a phenomenon that you describe as a natural phenomenon doesn't succeed as an explanation unless you have a way of supplying objective independent reasons behind that choice of satisfying the principle of sufficient reason. And by the very nature of these particular cases, design, giving laws, dictating morality, the supposition of objective reasons undermines the appeal to the rational agent to begin with. Now, another aspect of this argument that Russell doesn't really point to is whether or not it looks like these analogies and these phenomenon are as robust as you need for this argument to go through. So just as with the argument from design, the argument from natural law, if you see cases that don't look manifestly clear-cut and obvious, then that undermines the force of this analogy between, in the case of argument from design, an artifact and the structure in the world. So if you go out and you look at the world and you say, well, there are some cases that people kind of pretty much agree about, but not everything. Right? So for instance, the prohibition against murder, that's sort of universal and exceptionless, but it's not completely. So killing someone in self-defense, in times of war, by accident, no one treats those things as exactly the same as premeditated murder. And so if those judgments are just clearly manifest about those actions, it undermines the idea that there are laws, precepts that have to be explained. So I see I've actually run out of time. We'll deal with that final argument in the next lecture and module.